And warm welcome to Big Talk, live from the nation's capital, Abuja. My name is Adikat Michael. Tonight, we'll now turn our attention to the new President Tinubu's tax bill that has already been sent to the National Assembly, generating a lot of concern. Recall that October 3rd, that was precisely on the 3rd of October 2024, it transmitted 4 tax reform bills to the National Assembly. The bills are the Nigeria Tax Bill 2024. The Nigeria Tax Administration Bill is the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill and the Joint Revenue Board Establishment. Together, these bills would overhaul the tax administration and revenue generation in Nigeria, as many of the previous contained in them and a landmark in nature. And now these tax reforms bills did not just come out from the blues. They are a product of a year worth of intense hard work and a consultation by Taiwo Oyedele-led Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and the Tax Reforms that was inaugurated by the President on assumption of office. Now, 2 months after he had assumed office as the President, it was very obvious that President Tinubu saw tax reforms as one of the primary things his administration needs to achieve in order to lay a very strong fiscal and revenue foundation for sustainable growth for the rest of the tenure and beyond. Now, there's a very controversial part of the bill which has to do with the VAT, which many governors and senators from the National Assembly, including many prominent senators, are focusing their attention on, which the provisions about the value-added tax are contained in the Chapter 6 of the Nigeria Tax Bill. It is very true that the bill in Section 146 provides for a gradual increase in VAT rate from the current 7.5% to 10% in 2025, the 12.5% in 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029, and it pegged it at 15% for 2030. However, these has continued to hold a lot of concern on the basic goods and services that are consumed by the poor, are either totally exempt from paying VAT, and all of those concerned. But the question many of the critics of these bills is the fact that would that really give the essence of the rates? Would that affect the lives of the poor? Would the purchasing be normal? From the obvious that the Nigeria Tax Bill is the single biggest tool which many have said from Nigeria's independence can greatly facilitate ease of doing business in Nigeria. Joining us tonight is the former gubernatorial aspirant of Kano State PDP and the public commentator, of course, has been on the program regularly and is here to give us adding more concerns to the issues and raising the bars on how we can begin to understand better the new President Tinubu reforms bills. Jaffer Sani Bello. Thanks so much, Doctor, for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
Michael, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you.
All right.
There seems, many Nigerians seems to picture that the North are against the agenda of President Tinubu, that the bill this time around is, the critics is more from the North, from your governors, from your senators. What would you say about that?
Well, I would say, you see, when you see a smoke screen, you tend to believe that there is something hidden behind it. Because if it's a screen that is shielding you from seeing the right perspective or angle of things, then you are not seeing anything. But a smoke screen is a kind of a glowy shadow that protects you from having a clear vision about something. The apprehension in the northern part of the country, especially from the northern elite, is on specifically the issue of derivation when it comes to value-added tax. And when we look at VAT is more or less a consumer-based taxation. It's a consumption-based taxation. Because when you produce, you add value to what you produce, and it's not consumed, you not produce. So the issue of derivation, when you look at it, is that most of centers of production now has shifted to specifically the Lagos-Ibadan axis of the southwestern part of the country, because they have more stable electricity supply and what have you. There have been so many government policies that have favored them, When we take a look at the 8 years of the Obasanjo administration, a lot has been done to stabilize the infrastructure, energy infrastructure in the southwestern part of the country. And when Buhari came in, he did a lot to fast track their transportation and road network infrastructure. And President Tinubu is coming in now to cash in on the population of the country to drive more liquidity, more finances to the southwestern part of the country. Because if you look at the population of a state that I come from, let's say Kano State, and you look at the amount of trucks and lorries that haul goods from the southwestern part of the country to the state Kano, and these things are consumed in Kano, and some of them are exported through a trans-Sahara route up to Burkina Faso, Mali, and Central African Republic. It's kind of ushers in a concern that what we consume that brings about the prosperity of the production facilities, those the companies that are producing these items or commodities or products for our consumption, are basically ripping us, and at the end of the day we are not getting anything in return from what we have contributed to the development or to the finances of those production companies. And if you look at another example, two of big, what we call them, business magnates in Nigeria. When you talk of Aliko Dangote, you talk of Abdulsamad Dubuwa, they are products of Kano that were exported to the southwestern part of the country, who have commensurately and commendably contributed to the infrastructure, to the commercial scope of those states, and to the industrialization of those states in the southwestern part of the country. If you look at Abdulsamad Abubakar, he has a flour mills down there. He has a lot of manufacturing outlets down there. If you look at Alhaji Aliko Dangote, he has a lot of manufacturing outlets down there. It is this togetherness, this Nigerianness that made them to move to those certain part, to that certain part of the country, and the accessibility to import goods easily and clear them from the ports, that made them to move to that section of the country to produce and distribute across the nation for marketing and for consumption. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that this issue of tax reform, the other issues of the changing of the name of the Federal Inland Revenue Services, it has been a norm to this administration. They think name change can perform magic. No. The national anthem of the country has been changed, and the prices of fuel has skyrocketed. When the national anthem was changed, I think a liter of fuel goes for around 700 naira. Now it goes for around 1,200 naira. So the change in national anthem has not bring in any dividend to the Nigerian common man. Likewise, now they are proposing to change the name of the agency that recoups and keep custody of finances, taxable finances, which is the Federal Inland Revenue Services. They want to change the name to the Nigerian Revenue Services Board. That will also not do anything. It will not perform any magic, because it is not in the name, but it is in the individual and the structural organization and the institutionalization of credibility, transparency, and honesty and dedication to service that brings about productivity and change in any system. Once these are lacking, there is no amount of name change that will bring about any desired result.
Doctor, let me take you through, because they are concerned that it looks that those that are opposing this bill are really afraid of accountability, because that those that feel that if, when we begin to know how much we pay, when we know how much the taxes where people are remitting to state. From there, people will now be aware of what government now have. People will now be aware of holding government responsible, for expenses, and all of that. Would you rather say that if the North are saying we do not want this bill, basically because of the issues, the clause within the VAT, just as you've highlighted, entirely we should send the bill out of the National Assembly because it looks that there are considerations in the bill that is trying to project accountability?
Of course, I've told you the only issue about the bill is there are things that you can call make-ups that don't add up, like the change in name of the Federal Inland Revenue Services to the Nigerian Revenue Services Board, or whatever you want to call it. And nobody has any issue with that. And then creating a tax tribunal, nobody should have any issue with that, because the rate of tax default in this country is astronomical. And once we have something that would fast track the issue of bringing in redress to the issue of tax evasion, it's a welcome development, and nobody is against that. The issue of having an ombudsman to oversee the activities of the sector, nobody has an issue with that. But once you say derivation, okay, why don't we look at it this way? You produce, and then the amount of commodities, goods, and services that you produce that is being consumed by a certain state should form the basis for the derivation. For instance, if I produce Viva in Kano, which is a sachet detergent, and 10 trucks of it, 1 truck is consumed in Kano and 9 trucks of that product is consumed in Lagos, the derivation should be based on production vis-a-vis consumption, because no manufacturer will thrive if his products, goods, and services are not purchased. They have to be purchased first and foremost before he makes any meaningful profit or gain for expansion or stabilization, or to even maintain the standards or the status he is in. The issue now of concern is the life of Nigerians any better that the government is thinking of inflicting more pain and hardship on Nigerians with taxation? No, it's not. Countries world over that have concern for the livelihood, living, and psyche of their citizens, they first of all address peculiar, pertinent issues that affect a majority.
So you're saying that the timing is wrong because Senator Ndubisi said that we cannot tax Nigerians now and all of that, that many Nigerians are not ready to.
Absolutely. The timing is wrong. Look, Nigerians have over 1,000% increase over the last 10 years. In anything a Nigerian purchase, he has over 1,000-fold increase or 100-fold increase. Let me give you an instance. In 2014, before the advent of this APC administration, a sachet of milk goes for 20 naira. Now the same sachet of milk goes for 250 naira. Before the coming of this administration, a bag of rice, 50 kg, goes for 7,000 naira. Now the same 50 kg bag of rice goes for 110,000 naira. So how do you start bringing in reforms with taxation when the purchasing power and the purchasing income of every Nigerian has depreciated? It has not appreciated. We should have had this debate about tax reform and what have you, when the minimum wage in Nigeria can offer an employee the opportunity to procure a bag of rice, a 4-liter jar of oil, a pack of Indomie, a pack of spaghetti, a pack of macaroni, with 30,000 naira in 2014. A Nigerian civil servant with a minimum wage of 30,000 naira can afford these 5 basic items and have change to fuel his car at 85 naira per liter. But now you have a minimum wage which is yet to be implemented. Only a few states have even adopted it, of 70,000 naira that cannot even purchase a Nigerian a 50 kg bag of rice. Not to talk about fueling his car to go to work, not to talk about the expenses that has skyrocketed in paying transportation if he doesn't have a car, to pay for intra-city commuting between one point to another. Not to talk about if his wife or son or he himself is sick to pay or afford his medical bill. There are so many things that are on the head of Nigerians that the issue of taxation now should not be a primary focus of a government that is concerned about the feelings and yearnings of its citizens.
Does it clearly look that President Tinubu is trying to combat corruption, which that those that says that it looks that agencies do give waiver to some business cabal, that not all businesses in Nigeria are remitting tax, because they're also looking at if this tax will mean that it will be transparent, we now know businesses that are paying taxes and all of that. So in a way, it's also targeting at businesses cabals in this country. Do you share in that sentiment?
Well, we have had so many institutions that were brought into existence in this country, all in the name of fighting corruption, and nothing has happened. In fact, corruption is going from bad to worse. Let me give you an example. During the Obasanjo administration, former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo put in place ICPC, put in place EFCC, and that got Nigeria debt relief into tunes of billions of dollars. But along the way, these two agencies have derailed from their primary focus, which is stopping corruption. They have turned into fighting corruption. We should have graduated now from fighting corruption to stopping corruption before even corruption happens. We should have had agencies, and we should have sensitized the Nigerian citizenry to always speak up against corruption. But what do we have now? We have plethora of cases of corruption in courts. Somebody steals billions of naira and goes to jail for 7 years. It has just happened recently. Somebody steals billions of naira just because of one simple clause in the filing of the case, one lousy mistake by an attorney or a counsel. The court will throw out the case. Our judicial system, in fact, needs to be reorganized, re-engineered, so that it can have a specific focus on the issues that are bedeviling the nation. When you don't have an incorruptible judicial system, there is no amount of work that you will do in your country that will rid it of corruption. So these things are just by the way. It is not going to do in any way.
It's not going to stop the
It's not going to stop anything, because you don't have a judicial system that is up to the task. You don't have a judicial system in the country that is up to the task. Nobody believes in the...
Who are those that are destroying the judiciary? Is it not the politicians?
Those
that feel that they are the ones that are...
If the politicians are destroying the judiciary, why are the politicians in other countries of the world not destroying their own judiciary? It's because there are upright people in the judiciary that are incorruptible. The vetting processes of selecting those people that will be in the judiciary is based on merit. We now have just recently a Chief Justice of the Federation who appointed his son, his in-law, his wife as justices of the Federation. How do you have an incorruptible judicial system that way? It is all an issue of kith and kin. You don't have an incorruptible judicial system that way. And the fundamental problem with the Nigerian project is judiciary.
Well, with fairness to judiciary, the news CGN just said that it's just a few eggs.
That's it. We need to see the action. That's it.
All of them.
She said that it's a few eggs, rotten eggs. Get rid of the rotten eggs. It would have been better for you to tell me that the recent, the current CGN of the Federation has rooted out some rotten eggs from the judicial service of the country, rather than to say a few.
Of doubt?
No. There is no benefit. There is no benefit of doubt here, because if you know there are rotten eggs, you should have fished them out and flushed them out of the system. That should have been the story. Not that there are a few rotten eggs, because for you to make mention that there are a few rotten eggs,
statement of fact.
No, it's a statement of fact. She should have sat down on her decks and root out those rotten eggs and flush them out of the system. That could have been concrete news that Nigerians will celebrate. But no Nigerian will celebrate the fact that the Chief Justice of the Federation is telling us that it's just a few bad eggs in the judiciary that are dragging the judiciary and dropping the judiciary and drawing it a bad name. That is news everywhere. That is news that every Nigeria is aware of. That's a statement of fact. What Nigerians ought to have seen is the CGN sitting down to root out those rotten eggs and flush them out of the system. Because without a judicial reform in Nigeria, we don't need a tax reform bill in Nigeria. We need a judicial reform bill in Nigeria, whereby erring judges that give out controversial and what will you say, business-like orders are flushed out of the system. Conflicting orders are flushed out of the system, and no room is left for such peoples or individuals to rise in the judicial system.
Today wasn't for judicial, so let's focus on the issue, because it looks at all of these reforms introduced by the president is probably to fix things right. According to the president, issues of subsidy removal, floating of the naira, and the advice that have been given by the panel that was set up, to look at the tax. In a way, does it look clearly that the government has a direction? Because there are those that have been a concern. Priorities of government, what is affecting Nigerians? Would you rather say that this might also be an attempt in addressing many issues we have in the country?
Mr. Michael, you just made a statement that got me laughing, because any government that is serious about addressing the issues of a country like Nigeria will not go the route that this administration is going to. This administration is constantly taking the route of inflicting pains on Nigerians and then pushing the buck elsewhere. Taxation is implementable in a society where the purchasing power of the citizenry of the nation has some excesses. But these people are going through the back door to inflict more taxes. Do you think that these taxes are just going to be paid by the companies? They are going to be paid by the consumers. They are going to be paid by the consumers. And this is an administration that at this particular moment in time is looking from jacking the VAT from 7.5%, when there are countries neighboring here in Africa, Ghana for example, that have written off VAT. That have written off so many taxes here and there. This administration should be looking at ways to have reduced.
But in other climes, there are also countries that are also
look at their standard. Look at their standard of living. Look at their minimum wages. They have surpluses. So if they are taxing their people, look at their roads. Look at electricity. Look at pipe-borne water. Look at their healthcare system. Everything is fixed. Everything is ready to go. Everything is in a proper condition that it ought to be. Look at their housing. Do you know the housing deficit in Nigeria? Do you know the number of people living in slums in Lagos, in Kano, in Ibadan, in Port Harcourt? Do you know the number of people living in barchards in Abuja? Do you know the number of people that are sleeping on the streets in Nigeria that cannot earn a living, and people that have worked so hard to have earned degrees and masters? Yes!
Can government fix all of that?
Government should take steps to fix these things, not to... Let me tell you something. Just take a visit along Aminu Kano Crescent around 12 midnight. See the group of young Nigerian men and women that sleep in the front of these fast food chains with their nets, mosquito nets, only to wake up in the morning and go into these fast food chains and work, because their salary cannot afford them to live in Dede, to live in Kado, to live in wherever you are thinking about, and transport themselves to their places of work. This is the situation that Nigerian masses, youths that have gone through the four corners of education: primary school, junior secondary school, senior secondary school, university. They have gone through the four corners of education, living in mosquito nets in the front, in the premises of their place of work. To wake up in the morning, use the bathrooms of their place of work, get dressed and start the morning afresh. And this is the country that you're trying to inflict more taxation that will inflict more pains. Come on.
They're also concerned that this government will tell you we inherited a bad economy.
From who?
These are the problems we are trying to...
From who? From who?
They've also apportioned it to your party.
They can't apportion it. They cannot apportion it to my party, because the people... No. The People's Democratic Party left a debt profile of less than $1 to $12 billion in Nigeria. What is the debt profile of Nigeria today?
Is it accumulated? It has accumulated to the point that government said we cannot borrow again.
But who accumulated it? Who accumulated it? It is the Buhari administration. The Buhari administration is the APC administration. That's one good thing about the People's Democratic Party. You never heard Umar Musa Yar'Adua of blessed memory apportioning blames to Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. He came to the tax and he did what he can do. You never heard Chief Goodluck Ebele Jonathan apportioning blame to Umar Musa Yar'Adua or Obasanjo. He came to the table, he saw the tax and he did what he could do.
Maybe because of the party ideology.
If there is
also trying to push blame to.
He has already because he is his predecessor. If you are pushing blame, you can't push it to anybody else apart from your predecessor. And then it surprises me when people that are key and important in this government come on and say, oh, no, he is not to be blamed. Who announced the removal of subsidy at a point, Jack?
But do we need to still pay subsidy? Because your party are also subscribed to the fact that subsidy is evil. We cannot continue.
You see, there is no country in the world that does not pay subsidy. No country in the world that does not pay subsidy, and it pays subsidy on what is important and dear to the needs of its people. What is important and dear to the needs of Nigeria is fuel. Fuel is attached to everything that runs the economy in Nigeria. You understand? That was why it baffled so many Nigerians when somebody that rose to become the central bank governor of Nigeria never knew that 80% of generating plants in Nigeria run on petrol, not diesel. There has to be a mindset that is focused on the Nigerian citizenry and not on the elite, not on the personal interests of other people. The personal interests of our leaders should be the interests of its citizenry, its well-being and welfare. That should be the personal interests of our leaders, not anything either. At this point in time, we should look at how do we address the criminality and banditry that is going on in the nation. How do we address our poor infrastructure, our road infrastructure that kills millions of our Nigerian citizens on a daily basis on the roads? How do we address ecological disasters that have ruined so many states in the country? How do we jerk up production in agriculture? These are the things that we need to look in. How do we open up avenues that people come into the country and invest so that our teeming youths can have gainful employment? What we have now is slavery employment, as I have just told you. You just go in, I don't want to make mention of them, as fast food chains. Go around Abuja here and see what is happening. People are earning slavery wages. And this is the same administration that said they are going to give a living wage. Now Nigerians are realizing that the People's Democratic Party's administration was the administration that gave Nigerians a living wage. It was an administration that advanced and promoted the development of Nigeria.
People were still hungry under that regime. People were still,
of course,
people were still poor.
Of course, there are there are people that are hungry, as in everywhere in the world. Of course, there are people that are in poverty, as in everywhere in the world. But the percentage and number of people that are hungry now has quadrupled the number of people that were hungry during our administration. That's a fact.
Back on the economy, let's look at multiple taxation, because there are also consideration that people pay more taxes. You will see where state government are taxing, federal government are taxing, even the local government, also placing taxes on the people. And people are also having a projection that this bill may, address all of that concern and see how that can work.
This bill is not going to address any concern with relation to that multiple taxation, because let me give you an example. A state that I come from, like Kano, if the federal government decides to pass this bill and enact this bill when it is passed as law into effect, as a law in this country, a state like I come from with a population of over 20 million people will look at ways to augment what it has lost that it's getting from VAT. Let me give you an example. If you go to Dawanau Market in Kano and you see the amount of truckloads of maize, rice, millet, sorghum, beans that moves from the northern part of the country, from the state in particular, to the southern part of the country, it will be shock. One would be surprised seeing about 1,000 trucks, daily movement of 1,000 trucks per day. What will happen if the state decides, okay, every truck that is leaving Kano State, which produce which we are certain that the produce that has been loaded onto this truck is not going to be consumed in the state, we are going to tax it. what happens? What happens if a state like Kano says, okay, we have a detergent soap making company in Kano, Viva, is doing well. We have a tea bag making company in Kano, Dala Foods, which has survived so many ups and downs in economic turmoil, power supply and what have you. Dala Foods, it's making CTT Dala, and they decide to ban the products that are being brought in from other states into the state. What happens? What happens if the state says, okay, Coca-Cola is producing in Kano, but the derivation will go to Lagos because its major plant is Lagos. We have Pop-Cola in Kano. We are banning the sale of Coca-Cola. You are going to create chaos. Once people see a policy as targeting them, they are going to fight back. So this policy is going to create chaos, it's not going to manage chaos. And there is nothing surprising about this administration that is always focused on augmenting hardship on Nigerians rather than reducing hardship on Nigerians. So there is nothing new about this. I don't see it from...
Is it a concern of trying to take soft, hard pens and little pens for the better days ahead of time?
That's not the way you start, by taking hard pens and little pens for the better days ahead. You start by correcting yourself. Your lifestyle. Nigerians should see it in the presidency. Should see a reduction on the convoy. Should see a reduction in the wastages that go. How have they done that?
They have reduced.
What have they reduced? That's on paper. That's on paper. It's on paper. Nigerians need to see it practically.
The body language of government is not showing.
It's not showing that. It's not showing that. Recently, the president purchased a new jet. Recently, the president changed from Mercedes-Benz to Escalade, an Escalade Jeep.
You want your president to be safe. We want the president to stay alive.
Look, if you want the
safety of the president,
the safety of the president is not on the brand of car he drives. The safety of the president does not depend on the brand of car he drives. If it is the brand of car that the safety of the president of a nation depends on, you wouldn't have the likes of China using their homemade cars. You wouldn't have the likes of India using their homemade cars. The president of Nigeria, if the body language that he wants to send to Nigeria of change is to be shown, we should see him in an Innoson Motors. We should see him being driven in an Innoson Motor. Nigerian senators should be driving Innoson Motor. Nigerian Federal House of Representatives members should be driving Innoson Motors, not cashing away our hard-earned forex to Japan to import Toyota Land Cruisers and Prado Jeeps, to America or to Italy to import Escalades. The body language is practical. The body language should be seen. The body language is not something that you just write on paper and you just dish it out to your spokesman Paul Onago to send to pressmen to read. It is something that we can see. If you see the Prime Minister of India, he is being driven in a Tata vehicle, which is a South African-made vehicle. The president of Russia is being driven in a Russian homemade vehicle. The president of China is being driven in a Chinese homemade vehicle. What stops a Nigerian that has an Innoson Motors plant in Nigeria from being driven in an Innoson Motors?
Well, Doctor, clearly it looks that it has been a practice over time because those in government.
No. It hasn't been a practice over time because during the Gowon administration, when we have an operating Peugeot plant, the president of the country drives in a Peugeot car. So it hasn't.
How do we get to that point? Because
we get to that point from an individual taking a stand that I want to make it correct, I want to make it right, not pay lip service. This administration and the president of this administration, they are paying lip service.
These members of the 10 National Assembly will tell you that, look, out of our colleagues, government had gotten vehicles to them. The distribution of vehicles.
Which other?
The 7th Assembly to the 8th Assembly and all of that.
That's what I'm saying. It needs to get to a point where one individual will say enough is enough, and I mean to get it right.
So it does look like this set of people
at all. They are not the set of people that mean enough is enough and we want to get it right. They are not the sort of people.
All right, let's look at issues of the agencies, because it also looks at the bill we haven't also see how to merge. Some of these agencies are probably not really primarily delivering on the duty, because it looks at even the cutting cost of governance, that those who are having a concern our SOYA report, which also have it that we can't continue to have, multiplications of our duties, within government agencies and parastatals. Clearly, would you seek that there are some agencies that are not generating?
Why hasn't the Oronsoye report been implemented up to date? When this administration, at the advent of this current administration, a committee was set up to review the Oronsoye report under Hadiza Bala Usman, who is the special advisor to the president on policy and what have you. Why hasn't it been implemented? That's the question that you need to ask.
Well, since the government at first...
Why hasn't it been implemented? They have come to state that these, even to state some of the agencies and parastatals that were to be merged, why hasn't it been implemented? Because a certain section of this country feels if that Oronsoye report is implemented, it will be shortchanged. Which section of the country has the majority of civil servant? Which section of the country has a majority of heads of parastatals? So at the end of the day, they don't want to implement a policy that is going to shortchange them, but they want to bring in a tax reform bill that is going to shortchange others. And you believe others will sit down and look? They will go back into their shelters and they will design and conscript methodologies and mechanisms that would safeguard them against those shock that shortfall will eventually make on them. So they will definitely fight back.
So you agree to merging of agencies?
Of course. The cost of governance is too high that the government of the day does not consider that as an issue, but it considers tax reform as an issue. It has not forwarded a bill to the National Assembly to scrap most of these agencies. Let me give you an example. Just recently I had something. Somebody was telling me that wheat production of this season is going to be flagged off in Calabar, Cross River State. When did Cross River State become a wheat producing state? These are geographical issues and they are bound by nature. There is nowhere on earth where wheat will thrive under more than 14 degrees night temperature. Night temperature, wheat will not thrive under any condition that has less than 14 degrees night temperature. Go and study the weather of Calabar. The barest minimum they have is about 2019. So how would we do that? And the agencies here should have told the state government, okay, use some part of your money to invest in wheat production. When we see the success, then we bring in federal money. But now federal money is going into a funnel that is not going to thrive and not going to bring anything. This is the mindset in Nigeria. Look at what we have been having in place. We misplace our priorities. Instead of us to focus on our strength, look at our weakness, and look at how we will use our strength to overcome our weakness. We rather look at our weakness and decide to augment the weakness. The country does not move that way. We need to see in place certain policies that are geared towards sanitizing the tax regime in the country and not bringing about diversionary issues for a particular agenda. All these, the issue of name change, the issue of an ombudsman, the issue of a tax tribunal are all diversionary. The clandestine mission is for derivation. It's for derivation. And once you have derivation, then we will come to a day where the oil producing section of the country will tell you, okay, we get 100%, we pay you royalties. There was a time in Nigeria where we had a republican system, and that is the norm. And what happens? Whatever you consider as an advantage will be taken as a disadvantage by another. And whatever you see as a disadvantage is an advantage to another. So let us not be stereotyping ourselves into boxing ourselves into taking decisions that benefit our regional sentiments or our sectional sentiments. We should be first and foremost Nigerians, because then when we get to that time, that is when Nigeria will start to progress. When I see myself first as a Nigerian before I see myself as a Fulani from Kano, I first of all see myself as a Nigerian, then I will be able to think along the line of what makes Nigeria great. But if I think of myself as a Fulani man from Kano, my first instincts would be, what are the things that will develop Kano and will develop my ethnic group lineage, which is the Fulani. And that is what is happening in the country.
All right, Doctor. You clearly will agree that we need to go back to production, that gradually, issues of production is quite very low in the country. We tend to still have to import and all of that. And when you look at all of those VATs and the taxations on these goods, it looks that we need to pay attention to to production. Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of Labour Party, has argued that we are consuming nation and we are not producing. And when you look at this bill, there are those that are also having a concern that this may boost, state and regional, production. People to be creative, people to go back to think of what they can also do, to help our economy, to also address the issues of the economic hardship by boosting production. Are you sharing that concern?
I'm not sharing that concern, and Nigeria is a producing nation, but Nigeria is a nation that has been clamped within the claws of an elite that does not have any concern for the progress of the nation. They concern its material acquisition appetite and what have you. If you look at Nigeria, an average Nigerian is a productive person, because when you take a Nigerian out of the shores of Nigeria, they excel. There's no doubt about that. But what happens is this: a small business in Nigeria is crushed before it even starts working, when it's crawling. If you want to export out of this country, if you see the strain, the hardship, the trouble that one goes through to export out of this country, you pity him. If you want to import, if you see the strain, the hardship, the reckless taxes here and there, gates here and there that a Nigerian faces, you pity him. I will tell you, no business that has survived in Nigeria will not be a global enterprise elsewhere in the world, because there's so many encumbrances, there's so many challenges, there's so many difficult terrains that are put before a Nigerian as hurdles to cross to thrive in business are so enormous. Nobody should accuse Nigerians of being lazy or being unproductive. Nigerians are a productive nation. They are not a consuming nation. If Nigeria is a consuming nation, how many tons of rice do you think will be imported by now? How many tons of maize do you think will be imported by now? How many kilos of meat, protein, do you think will be imported into this country by now? How many tons of palm oil do you think will be imported into this country by now? It's because we are a producing nation, but the economic environment and the business environment is so toxic that it's making it difficult for Nigerians to make a living.
So how do we scale this? Because
these are the things.
Just about
these are the things that the government needs to start looking into. Let me give you an example. When you get to our ports, even our airports, you have the Nigerian immigration there, you have EFCC there, you have NDLEA there, you have Nigerian police there, you have Nigerian immigration service there, you have all sorts of agencies there, and each one of them has a separate counter. Why won't the government look at the possibilities of all putting them in one booth? Why won't the country look at the system whereby with a simple software, we have a single trade window in Nigeria where all these agencies are on, but yet it's not sufficient for them. They have to be at the point of entry and at the point of exit. Why is it so? Nigeria is the only country in the world that you see this. Why is it so? These are the things that the government needs to start looking into, so that they could ease the means of doing business in the country. And that is how businesses would thrive, not with changing the name of the revenue agency or changing the national anthem or what have you. These are not drivers of economic prosperity or growth. The drivers of economic prosperity and growth are in regularization and simplification of the processes that enable businesses to thrive. Do away with multiple taxation, do away with multi-sectoral agency approvals and certification. You want to do something in Nigeria, you need NAFDAC certification, you need SON certification, you need custom clearance, you need EFCC clearance, you need this clearance and that clearance. It is too much trouble for an individual to do business in Nigeria, and you have to always dove your heart. for people that have thrived in doing business in Nigeria. This is Global TV. It has just come upstream 1 year. If you go through the management and you ask them the kind of difficulties they have gone through to come to this stage in Nigeria, they would have been an international broadcast studio and elsewhere in the world. You are operating from a place that you have to get steady power supply. It is quite expensive for you. It would have been cheaper for you to operate from anywhere where there is steady 24 hours power supply. That is the toxic Nigerian business environment you are living in. And yet, the government of the day has no focus on that. Its focus is on tax reform based on derivation, so that its region, the region where the president came from, or the state where the president came from, will have more income.
You seem to still look at that angle, because
that's the angle.
Disagree with you.
That's the angle.
All of that concern.
That's the angle.
But in all of this, it takes us to build this country. I mean, it looks at the commitment of the president. That those that said he had this template in Lagos, and that's probably the same template he's trying to replicate in Nigeria.
What is he trying to replicate in Nigeria that he has done in Lagos?
He boosted the IG of
what has
Lagos.
He boosted by making
the current situation?
Okay. Let me ask a simple question here. If you ask and you go round the streets of Lagos and you ask how many Lagosians in between the time he was governor for 8 years have moved from being public servants, from being civil servants, or from being entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs, to multinational businesses, you won't get any.
Is that your yardstick?
Yes, you won't get any. You have countries that have produced the likes of Elon Musk, that have produced the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, that have produced the likes of Steers, that have produced the likes of Steve Jobs. These are countries that you take as having done something to the well-being and benefit of their citizenry, because they have eked out people out of poverty. Look at China. They have taken out over 200 million people out of poverty. India has taken out 100 million people out of poverty. This is the kind of government that you should look out and see what have they done to reach that level. They minimize government spending, they stamped out corruption. When you steal, you go to the gulag. In China, it's as simple as that. In India, you are corrupt, you lose election. It's as simple as that. These are countries that you can even predict the outcome of their election. Our neighboring country, Ghana here, you can predict the outcome of the election that is going to come up next. You can't predict the outcome of an election in Nigeria, because if the electoral body does not do its somersault, it's the judiciary that will do another kind of somersault, or this or that. So you cannot predict what is actually going to happen in the Nigerian polity. That's the kind of toxic state that we are in. When I hear people giving an example of his stewardship in Lagos, I laugh. Because what has he done in Lagos? Already Lagos is a commercial city when he went there. Already Lagos has enough infrastructure. He has not taken off the road jams. He has not built so many roads to ease movement in Lagos. He has not done anything in Lagos. When you talk about increasing IGR, any state in the country that takes out the empathy of its citizenry can jack up its internal generated revenue. All you need to do is remove that human feeling.
All right, Dr. Jaffer Sani Bello is a politician and a former gubernatorial candidate of People's Democratic Party in Kano State and a public commentator. Thanks so much, Doctor.
Thank you very much
for sharing your thought and concern.
Thank you.
And just for the betterment of this country, Nigeria. You're a very patriotic Nigerian. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, a lot of concern among the Nigerian people over the tax reforms. Would this greatly facilitate ease of doing business in Nigeria? Would this remove, the confusions in tax matters drastically by increasing the revenue collection while simultaneously reducing the tax burden on both businesses and individuals? Would this simply be remarkable and on a single bill? All of that are the major concern and the question of Nigerians on this bill. And if these really have the interest of Nigerians, definitely the Nigerian people will always keep here. But if he's at the level, just as shared by some National Assembly members, that is targeting at Nigerians, targeting at the poor Nigerians, then it's also questionable that government must pay attention to the controversial bill that has sparked criticisms and concern among the Nigerian people. That's the size of tonight's shows on Big Talk Tonight. We'll enjoy other issues on the program tomorrow. My name is Edikan Michael. Thanks for watching and staying with us. See you tomorrow.